Imagine giving your best every night, unseen, mopping marble floors while dreams sleep above you. Then one morning, the CEO himself points, cold and dismissive. You're fired. But fate isn't done yet, because days later, Chrome and Thunder rolled in, and 200 Hell's Angels changed everything. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Your every comment, gift, and membership helps us bring more heart-touching stories to your life. Danny Collins lived in the stillness most people never noticed. When the skyscraper emptied and the city's pulse slowed, his work began. He was the janitor of Halden and Company, one of the wealthiest firms in the city. But to him, it was just a way to keep his daughter, Lily, fed. Each night, he clocked in at 9 p.m., pushing his cart of supplies past the gleaming lobby. His reflection on the polished floors looked smaller than he felt. Danny didn't complain. He couldn't. As a single dad, complaining didn't put food in the fridge. His wife, Sarah, had passed 5 years earlier. Since then, it had been him and Lily, the little girl with mismatched socks who believed her father could fix anything. He moved with rhythm. Mop, rinse, repeat. The offices smelled faintly of coffee and expensive cologne, reminders of lives he didn't live. But each paycheck, however small, meant Lily's lunchbox stayed full. Danny carried tiredness in his shoulders, but in his pocket, he carried a folded drawing Lily had made of him. My hero dad. That paper was worth more than the whole building. One night, while Danny was scrubbing a stubborn stain from the marble, a voice cut the silence. Cold, sharp. You missed a spot. He turned to see Richard Halden, CEO of Halden and Company, a man who wore wealth like armor. His suit was tailored, his watch gleamed under the lobby lights. Danny straightened. Good evening, sir. I'll get it. Richard looked him over as if he were less than the mop in his hand. This is a billion-dollar firm, not a train station floor. If you can't keep up, there are 100 more waiting for your job. Danny swallowed, nodding. He knew that tone, the kind that never wondered how many bills a man had stacked at home. When Richard left, Danny exhaled slowly. He wasn't angry. He couldn't afford anger. He just pictured Lily asleep in her bed, the stuffed fox tucked under her chin. That thought steadied him. But he didn't know that Richard's gaze would return, sharper than before, and that in a single morning his life would tilt. It happened on a Thursday. Danny arrived early, whistling softly, clutching Lily's forgotten lunchbox in his bag. He planned to drop it at school before heading to sleep. But as he wheeled his cart into the lobby, Richard Halden was already there, flanked by 2 executives. Collins, Richard barked. This isn't working. Standards are slipping. We're letting you go. Effective immediately. The words hit like bricks. Danny froze, mop halfway to the floor. Sir, I need this job. Please. My daughter. Richard cut him off with a wave of his hand. Not my problem. Security will see you out. Danny felt heat rise in his face. His throat closed. He wasn't just losing a paycheck. He was losing stability, dignity, the one anchor keeping him afloat. He looked at Richard one last time, searching for any trace of humanity. But Richard's eyes were already on his phone, scrolling, indifferent. Danny walked out, shoulders heavy, gripping Lily's lunchbox like it was the only thing he had left. The city felt louder that morning. Car horns, footsteps, snippets of laughter, all too sharp against Danny's silence. He walked the miles home because he didn't have bus fare to spare. Every corner he thought of Lily. How would he explain? She was only 7. She didn't understand layoffs or paychecks. Only that dad always came home with a smile, no matter how tired. He passed a gas station, noticed 2 bikers leaned against their Harleys, laughing. Their leather vests bore the unmistakable patch, Hell's Angels. Their engines gleamed like thunder waiting to break. Danny didn't stare. He kept walking, head down. People like them lived in another world, a loud, fearless one. His was quieter, filled with whispers of overdue bills and bedtime stories. At home, Lily greeted him at the door, wearing her mismatched socks. "Daddy, did you bring my lunchbox?" Danny forced a smile, pulling it out of his bag. He knelt to her eye level. "Always," he said softly. But behind that smile, a storm brewed he didn't yet know would roar louder than any Harley. The next days blurred. Danny searched job boards, filled applications, but the silence stretched on. His bank balance sank, groceries thinned. At night, he sat by the window, watching city lights flicker, wondering how long he could keep pretending to Lily that everything was fine. Then a spark. Someone had filmed Richard Halden firing him. A clip leaked online. A billionaire dismissing a janitor pleading for his job. Danny didn't even know it existed until a neighbor showed him on her phone. The internet reacted fast. Outrage poured in. Comments raged. How can a man with so much show so little heart? Single dad loses job for mopping too slow? Unbelievable. And buried among the flood was a comment that stood out. From an account with a winged skull logo, "We take care of our own. Stay tuned." Danny didn't know it then, but far beyond his small apartment, engines were already warming. It was Saturday morning when Danny heard it. A low rumble that grew into a roar. The kind of sound that made windows tremble. He peeked out his window, clutching a mug of cheap coffee. Down the street, chrome and leather filled the road. Harleys, dozens of them, riding in formation. Neighbors spilled out of their houses. Phones raised. Kids pointing in awe. The sound rolled closer, louder, until it wasn't just a noise. It was a force. And then they stopped. Not at the corner. Not passing through. They stopped right in front of Danny's apartment building. Engines cut. Silence hung heavy. One rider stepped forward, helmet tucked under his arm. His vest bore the unmistakable patch. Hell's Angels. He looked up at Danny's window and nodded once. Firm. As if to say, "We're here for you." Danny's heart raced. He wasn't the kind of man anyone fought for. He was just a janitor. A single dad. But today, it seemed, thunder had come knocking. Danny stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the sun. Lily clung to his leg, peeking at the sea of bikers lined across the street. The man in front introduced himself simply, "Name's Hawk. We saw what they did to you. That ain't how the world treats men who work hard." Danny shifted uncomfortably, unsure. I don't understand. Why are you here?" Hawk's gaze softened. "Because once upon a time, some of us were janitors too. Factory hands. Fathers just trying to feed their kids. And we don't forget where we came from." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "That CEO thinks he owns everything. But he doesn't own us. We bought something this week. Something with your name on it." Danny hesitated, hands trembling as he took the paper. He unfolded it. His breath caught. It was a stock certificate. A real share of Halden and Company. The bikers weren't just standing in solidarity. They had bought into the very empire that fired him. The story spread again, this time louder. Images of leather-clad bikers outside a janitor's apartment lit up social media. Headlines read, "Hell's Angels buy stock to defend fired single dad." By Monday morning, Halden and Company was buzzing. Employees whispered in hallways. Executives refreshed news feeds, watching the firestorm grow. And Richard Halden? He was furious. He slammed the paper down in his office, veins rising in his neck. "They think they can humiliate me? Some janitor and a bunch of bikers." But for the first time, his voice shook. Because it wasn't just bad press. Stockholders were calling uneasy. Investors questioned the company's soul. Meanwhile, Danny sat at his kitchen table, Lily at his side coloring. Across from him, Hawk and two other angels explained. "We're not done. That certificate? It's the start. We've got brothers from 3 states pooling in. Every paycheck, every dime. Soon, you won't just be a janitor they tossed aside. Danny blinked, stunned. Why me? Hawk's reply was simple. Because you're every working man who's been spat on by someone who thinks money makes them better. The following week, Danny found himself standing in the very lobby where he'd been humiliated. This time, though, he wasn't holding a mop. He was flanked by bikers in leather vests. Employees froze as chrome patches and heavy boots echoed across marble. Richard stormed down from his office, red-faced. What is this circus? Get them out of my building. But Hawk stepped forward calmly. We're not trespassing. We're shareholders now. And as shareholders, we have the right to be here. Gasps rippled through the staff. Richard's face drained of color. Danny's hands shook, but Hawk's steady presence grounded him. He met Richard's glare, voice low but clear. You fired me like I was nothing, but you were wrong. I'm not nothing. I'm a father, and now I'm part owner too. For the first time, Richard had no words. The janitor he'd dismissed was standing eye level, backed by thunder. The boardroom that day felt different. Executives who once ignored Danny now watched him with respect, or maybe fear. The Hell's Angels sat among them, leather creaking against mahogany chairs, a stark contrast to silk ties and cufflinks. A vote was called, minor on paper, but symbolic. A motion to review company treatment of lower-wage staff. Richard voted against. The rest, overwhelmingly for. The tide had shifted. And when Danny's name was read aloud as a registered shareholder, applause broke. Quiet at first, then building. Richard stormed out, muttering threats. But the damage was done. His power, untouchable days ago, now showed cracks. Later, standing outside, Danny looked at Hawk. I don't know how to thank you. Hawk smiled, lighting a cigarette. Don't thank us. Just keep showing your girl what a real man looks like. That's worth more than any stock. Danny glanced at Lily, waving her drawing in the air. My hero dad. It read again. But now it feels truer than ever. Richard Halden had built his empire on fear. People obeyed because they were afraid to lose their jobs. But fear, like glass, can shatter. And that's exactly what was happening. After the shareholder meeting, whispers spread. Employees who once lowered their eyes when Danny passed now stopped him in the street. Some shook his hand. Others whispered thank yous. A few even cried, saying they had families too and finally felt seen. Richard, meanwhile, was unraveling. His face appeared on news panels, defending himself, but the world only saw arrogance. Share prices wobbled. For the first time, his name was linked not to success but cruelty. One evening, Danny sat on the worn couch with Lily asleep against his arm. Hawk sat across, watching quietly. You're changing things, brother, Hawk said softly. Danny shook his head. I didn't do this. You did. Hawk leaned forward, eyes steady. No, we just lit the match. You carried it into the dark. The next board meeting wasn't just routine. It was war. Richard stormed in, barking orders. But shareholders interrupted him, voices sharp, demanding answers. Why had he humiliated an employee? Why was the company bleeding reputation? Danny sat at the far end, hands sweating, heart racing. He didn't belong in rooms like this. But then he felt a squeeze. Hawk's hand on his shoulder, grounding him. When it was Danny's turn to speak, silence fell. His voice trembled at first, but then steadied. I cleaned these floors for 10 years. I know the names of the guards who work nights, the janitors who skip meals to pay rent. You call them replaceable. I call them human. And I promise you, if you listen to them, this company will not just survive. It will heal. The room was still. Richard scoffed, but for once, no one laughed with him. Days later, the news broke. Richard Halden had been removed as CEO. The board voted him out, citing ethical and reputational damages. Danny saw the headline on his cracked phone screen while walking Lily to school. He stopped, blinking hard. People stared at him as though he was part of history, the janitor who brought down a king. That afternoon, he returned to the building not as an employee but as a part owner, greeted with nods and quiet respect. Richard was escorted out by security, his face pale, his tie loosened. For a brief moment his eyes met Danny's. Rage, disbelief, and maybe, just maybe, regret. Danny didn't gloat. He just nodded once. Because victory didn't need words. Outside, the parking lot was filled with chrome and thunder. The angels revved their engines, a wall of defiance and brotherhood. And for the first time, Danny realized he wasn't just standing alone anymore. That night, Danny cooked a real dinner. Not ramen, not scraps. Chicken, mashed potatoes, Lily's favorite. The small apartment smelled like warmth for the first time in months. Lily sat across the table, her eyes wide. "Daddy, are you happy now?" Danny paused, knife halfway through a piece of chicken. Happy? He thought of late nights, empty pockets, humiliation. He thought of Hawk and the bikers who had given him back his dignity. And then he looked at Lily, the only reason he had survived it all. "Yes, baby," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm happy. Because you can look at your dad and see someone who didn't give up." Lily reached for her drawing pad, scribbling fast. She flipped it around, grinning. This time, the paper read, "My hero dad and his angel friends." Danny laughed through tears. Thunder outside answered, as if the angels themselves approved. Months later, Halden and Company was different. Pay was fairer. Workers smiled again. The building felt alive, not suffocating. Danny didn't become rich. He didn't need to. He still lived in the same modest apartment, still walked Lily to school every morning. But when people passed him now, they didn't see just a janitor. They saw proof that dignity could rise from dust. On weekends, the rumble of Harleys still filled his street. Lily would run outside waving, the angels honking and raising their fists in salute. Danny would stand at the door, coffee in hand, heart swelling. He knew storms would come again. Life never promised ease. But he also knew this, he wasn't fighting alone anymore. And in the quiet, after the roar of engines faded, he whispered to himself, "They fired a janitor, but the world remembered a father." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and press the bell icon. Because this is just one of many stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. Stay with us. The next story might be the one you need most.